Alright, today I'm going to be refuting the claim that single-sex schools have substantial advantages to attend over co-ed schools. I will be refuting each of his secondary claims. The first claim I will refute is single-sex schools help people become more focused on academia than mixed-gender schools. The second claim I will refute is single-sex schools allow students to become more comfortable with voicing their opinions. And the third claim I will refute is single-sex schools assist students in taking on non-conventional leadership roles. The advocate's first claim is that single-sex schools help people become more focused on academia than mixed-gender schools. He states that single-sex schools are better because students are not distracted by the opposite sex. The advocate gives the example that boys often feel the need to impress girls by raising their hands in class. He has made a personal observation here, and there's no evidence to support this statement. However, he does support his claim with evidence from a study done in Florida that showed boys and girls scored higher on assessment tests in single-sex schools than boys and girls attending co-ed schools. This is insufficient evidence because the study was done in Florida, and it does not give an accurate view of single-sex schools across the nation. In 2005, the U.S. Department of Education did a systematic review on the comparison of single-sex schools and co-ed schools. They conducted over 300 quantitative studies that compared academics in both of the schools, and the results were mixed and not conclusive enough to show which educational environment was educationally superior. Single-sex school students did score slightly higher on assessment tests. However, the problem was only private schools were studied, so the results could not give sufficient evidence to make any generalizations about single-sex schools versus co-ed schools. While I was conducting my research for this subject, I found that the research on single-sex education has been done with private schools and not on single-sex classes in public schools. So it's hard to argue that co-ed schools aren't as focused on academia as single-sex schools. The evidence is inconclusive unless we're talking about public schools versus private schools. The advocate also states that single-sex schools have teachers that cater to the development needs of the students. There wasn't any evidence to support this. However, I found in the same study that I just mentioned, the U.S. Department of Education found that overall single-sex and co-ed school principal and teacher characteristics were similar. Single-sex school teachers have the same qualifications as co-ed school teachers, and teachers in both types of school follow similar curriculum. Single-sex schools are not the only schools with teachers that cater to the development needs of the students. Teachers in co-ed schools also cater to students' needs. The advocate's second claim is that single-sex schools allow students to become more comfortable voicing their opinions. He states that single-sex schools promote students to venture out and try new things. He gives personal examples about his experience at an all-boys school, but he does not give any evidence to support his claim. He also makes the claim that students that attend single-sex schools are more willing to voice their opinions without the fear of being made fun of. The advocate did not give any evidence to support this claim. I refute this claim because single-sex schools, as well as co-ed schools, have various clubs, sports, other activities to get the students involved and encourage them to venture out and try new things. The advocate's third claim is single-sex schools assist students to take on non-conventional leadership positions. He uses hypothetical examples like girls gaining the confidence to play field hockey and boys taking up cooking classes, but there isn't any evidence to support this claim. I'd like to make a counterclaim that mixed-gender schools give students the opportunity to develop the kind of leadership skills that single-sex schools cannot. Students in co-educational environments are able to take on leadership positions over their own gender as well as the opposite gender. According to Diane F. Halpern, PhD, a psychology professor, school is preparation for adult life. how can boys and girls learn to interact as equals in the workplace if they have no experience as equals in school? The separation of genders in schools will make it more difficult for individuals to take on leadership roles in the future. When students graduate and enter the real world, their interaction with the opposite sex is going to help them with their leadership skills. They grew up learning, interacting, and competing with the opposite gender, and they are more comfortable around the opposite gender. In co-ed schools, girls learn to compete with boys and boys learn to compete with girls. Cooperation and competition makes individuals more well-rounded, is what co-ed schools teach students and single-sex schools do not. In conclusion, the advocate used personal examples and hypotheticals to support his claim that single-sex schools have substantial advantages. And there should have been more evidence. Thank you.
Right, the structural issues are all fine, very easy to follow. The evidence on the first point is challenged as being primarily a personal example. That's okay. I'm not exactly sure why Florida is not representative. What's so distinct about the region? I'm not sure that that's really the best press. I think that the better argument that you have is that the collective research has found inconsistent results. Although it wasn't clear to me if you were quoting the Department of Education at that point or it's an inference that you're making on that point, and I think that that needs to be a little bit clear. The argument later on that the schools are essentially equivalent because of the principals and the teachers, that was a lot clearer, and I thought that that allowed us to make a little bit better comparison. Transition, the second point, was fine. Again, there's a challenge to the examples, but it's a limited kind of challenge. It sounds like you've got an alternate source of getting encouragement that you talk about. It's mostly an assertion on your part. I don't doubt that it's probably true, but if you're going to criticize the advocate's limited evidence, then you want to be careful not to be in the same circumstance there. On the third point, I thought, again, you had a good challenge on the hypothetical nature of the advocate's evidence, and here's where you actually provide a very distinct piece of evidence with a counterclaim on leadership issues that I thought was very effective on that point. All right, thank you.